Okay, well, hi everyone, and thank you very much for watching. Liam Hartree here today with another episode of Simply Inspired Podcast. Today is episode 228. Believe it or not, they've flown by. Today, joined by a very, very special guest. Truly honored to have this man on the show, John Wilgens, who is first and foremost known as a BMX legend. That's his first claim to fame, but there's a lot more to this story. John survived years of horrific abuse as a child before his journey into BMX. He's a published author. His book, anyone who wants to check it out, is called Ride BMX Glory Against All the Odds. This was also, his life story was also adapted into a film starring Ludacris, rapper turned actor, and Shane Graham as John. So today we'll be touching on some of the highlights of this, but anybody who wants to know more, buy the book, guys, or watch the film, because there's a lot in there as well. In addition to these things as well, John is involved in Harrow Bikes, where he's a global manager in over 80 countries, influencing the next generation of bike riders. And in, last but not least, he is also heavily involved in Adoption UK as well. Does a lot of great work giving back. So he's an ambassador for that charity. We have a lot to talk about. Hopefully I've done that justice in the intro, because John, you're a busy man, you do a lot. That's enough of me talking about you in third person. Thank you for coming on the show, and it's a privilege to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks, Liam. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. So, like I say, we've got a lot to talk about today. Let's go back in time a little bit to your early years and start there, because I don't always do these in chronological order, but we will today. As I said to our audience, anyone who wants to know in depth, buy the book, because everything is in there. And today we'll just be talking about some highlights, really. So going back to your childhood, obviously it's something that you put out there very bravely. I've got to say it like that, because it is. In those early years, before you were taken into care and before that happened, I mean, when I was researching for this, I've come across, sexual abuse, you being thrown into a fire, being knocked unconscious. I mean, it is shocking. In those early years, how did you survive? I mean, before you were taken into care, how were you not broken by some of those experiences, for want of a better term?
Yeah, Liam. I mean, it's as you mentioned, I mean, my first childhood memories. I was 3 years old. My dad threw me in the fire. It was electrical fire, but my foot got caught in between the two bars. And like growing up in the 70s in the UK, it's horrible to say, but domestic violence, especially in the schemes, was the norm. I mean, it's crazy that women stayed with their men, beating them up like that. And I mean, myself and my older brother would always, do what we could to protect our mum from her dad's violent beatings and the abuse that he put on her and then on us. So, I'm not sure where it all came from. Like, it was just, it felt like the norm, I didn't think I was anything special. And I felt by sharing my story, I could hopefully help others that may not want to share, but they can release it themselves without sharing, just by having that connection to my story that so many have gone through, and so many have gone through a lot worse as well. So I think very early on, I became street smart. I mean, when I say early on, I'm probably 5 years old. But I was living on the streets. I was too scared to go home. So I think that's where that driving force came from, that at an early age, I had to be a man at 5 years old. So it's pretty crazy. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it is incredible, as you say, the inspirational aspect, though, how other people feel that they're not alone going through these things. It's amazing. We'll touch on that more very, very shortly. But before we do, obviously, being taken into care and everything is another thing that into the Scottish foster system and what have you. That's another important part of your journey, really a turning point as well. So the same type of thing with that. I mean, obviously, you were 7, I believe, and you were sort of on your own in this situation, obviously in care, but really having to fend for yourself, I'd imagine, being separated from everybody. Same type of thing. How did you cope with that? What was your mindset to, I'm going to make it through this at such a young age, if you get what I mean with that,
Yeah, I mean, I was taken into care on the 24th of December, 1979, after my dad was beating my mum up, and I tried to stop him with a kitchen knife. So yeah, the whole family was broken up. My older brother was locked up, my older sister was locked up, and then myself and my younger sister, we were the last two. The social work department realized that this isn't a healthy home to be in, and so yeah, they took us away. But I mean, I guess one thing that felt great was I actually had a clean bed. I had food on the table, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That was not the norm. So sort of adjusted into that pretty easily. It almost felt like a holiday camp when I first got locked up. It was crazy because I was just in there with a bunch of boys that I became pretty friends with pretty quickly. Um, I was in there for 3 years, and then going into my foster family, that was quite difficult because, the way we were sort of brought up, I mean, we just didn't like anyone else that wasn't white. I mean, the movie is made in America, so it goes into that whole white supremacist thing. I didn't know what racism was. I was just taught to hate, and it's horrible. So when I first met my foster parents, my mum, she's from Glasgow, and my dad was from Sri Lanka, and so that was tough. It was tough, and I'm embarrassed to even say that now because he's the closest human to me in my life. My dad's been my dad for 40 years now. So yeah, but it was about 6, 7, 8 months of transition, getting through the struggles of finding that love is, to be protected, to have a warm home and in education and things like that. When I was with my biological father, I was just getting beatings and thrown all over the place and smashed up. So yeah, there was a new love in my life, and I liked it. So I think that's where the transition came from, that I liked this new life, that I felt comfortable. I felt I wasn't scared anymore. I felt protected, actually.
That is wonderful. That's a wonderful description of that. And again, it's another part of your story that is so powerful. Moving into compassion, moving into a loving space, from I'm not going to say hatred, but as you say, from that dislike of outsiders, it's incredibly powerful. Obviously, based on the film, there was a lot of adjustment. There was, your parents teaching you respect, teaching you certain lessons. This question is too big to go into here entirely. So, as I said at the beginning, everybody read the book if you want to know more. But just a couple of things that they taught you in that early transition, if you had to sort of highlight one or two things, what would they be? Because it's such a dramatic contrast to, where you were before in terms of
Yeah. I mean, one that stands out straight away is it's better to give than receive. And when I was younger, I was like, well, keep giving it because I'll take it, But it's so true in life. It's like, it is so much better to give um, to those less fortunate, or even those that just you give your time. I mean, that's the one thing I've definitely learned. The one thing you can't buy is time. And my parents gave me their time, which I definitely love and respect to this day. That's one thing I learned. Better to give and receive, and all we have is time. So that was the most powerful things I think I've got from my parents, and obviously the BMX bike that they bought me.
Yeah, that as well. And we'll get to that very soon, very, very soon now. Obviously leading into that, one of the things you've touched on is that you had a lot of anger in you, you had a lot of this pent-up emotion. So I think it's a valuable life lesson, because everything I ask in these interviews, it's never about dwelling on, this happened, that happened, but it's always the process of how you turned everything into a positive. There's so many things in life you flipped on their heads. So same question with this. I mean, when it came to sort of channeling that pent up energy, did that start with, getting your first bike, seeing the ET film where they cycled off, which is obviously well documented? Was that where you sort of started to channel some of your pent up energies, if you get what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I was still getting into a lot of fights when I went and lived with my parents at the beginning. But once I got that bike, it was taking all my negative energy and putting it into positivity. I wasn't scared of hurting myself. So I was riding that bike and jumping everything what I possibly could. And that, again, I didn't know at the time, but that was a form of meditation. You're living in the moment, you're living in the present when you're riding your bike, or even when you're just driving your car, you're in the present. So that was, yeah, that was the big turning point, definitely.
Absolutely. And obviously with that, what was your process of going from, you enjoy riding the bike, it's an escape, as you say, it's meditation, it's grounding in the moment. Going from that, like just the enjoyment to realizing I can go far with this, I can actually compete, I can actually do. Now, obviously, this was touched on in the film, but when I do these interviews, I love to get into the sort of psychological and emotional processes, because everybody who's achieved something big in sports, they go through that process of it starts as a hobby and it goes into obviously more professional or being more serious, if you get what I mean. So I know this one is probably a bigger expanse of time, but what was your process when it went from hobby to actually, I want to do this full time type of thing?
Yeah, it was really the brotherhood, like what I got from my friends when we all got together. Um, Even at competitions and stuff like that, you were actually supporting each other. You wanted your friend to win. You know, whoever was the best on the day, you're supporting them and you're wanting them to be the best on the day. So that was the one thing that I was drawn to. And a lot of my friends that I grew up with in Scotland and then in Australia and now here in America, it's all from BMX. I mean, I'm friends with guys I've known for 40 years and we're still the same, we're still having the banter and everything. And, my mates will be like, hey, Hollywood, like, they'll just keep me grounded, which is awesome. It's the friendships. And the one thing that you get from, especially with BMX, skateboarding, maybe surfing and stuff, is you can go anywhere in the world and you'll have a friend. You go to the skate park and you let your riding speak for you. So it's not like you're playing football or rugby or cricket. You can't just go to a cricket field. You have that same connection. With the action sports, it's like, yeah, you're noticed straight away and people are like, hey, I've got your back, which is amazing.
Yeah, it is incredible. I mean, it's one of the beautiful things about sports. Obviously, in that way, it's so unified. And what I mean by that is people can come from any background, people can be from all different areas of the world, all different circumstances, and just come together. And the mutual respect is wonderful. It's not a question. It's just a wonderful thing. But you
Yeah.
have said that you weren't necessarily, as I believe, like the most natural rider in the world. I mean, you said that you really had to put a lot of your steely determination, um, presumably taking that steely determination that allowed you to survive so many things earlier on and putting that into your riding. So what are your thoughts on that? That basically you said, you weren't the most talented person, but you have gone really far with it anyway.
Yeah. Honestly, I believe it was my passion for this. I was never driven to win contests or anything else. I was actually driven by the feeling my bike gave me, the adrenaline. I became pretty much an adrenaline junkie, because I just loved that feeling. So, and then being able to travel with your friends all over the world on these little kids bikes, we call them, little 20-inch BMX bike. Um, I mean, there's no price tag. You can't put a price tag on that. I've lived the life I've loved since I got on that bike, and I look at where I am now, where I was as a kid. Well, I mean, what was that? What's that? 14% of my life was there. So realistically, 86% of my life has actually been pretty good.
Hey, that's a good way to look at it. I like that. Yeah, break it
Just
down.
made that up. I just made that up right then. I've never said that in an interview.
Yeah, but the principle of it though is brilliant, because I think I read one thing where you said that basically you've lived outside of Scotland for as long as you lived, or more time than you lived
Yeah,
in.
now more. It's gone on. Yeah, I was 23 years in Scotland, and this will be my 28th year overseas.
Yeah.
I will actually. I'm looking at buying a place up in just in. My parents live in Dundee, so I'm looking just outside Dundee, probably Broughty Ferry, which is a nice little spot near the ocean, near the Tay, and you know, there's no place like home. I love traveling. I think I said to myself when I was younger, I'm going to travel for 40 years and then retire back home. But I'll probably still keep a place in California for the winters.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's got there's no place like home, but but the weather is a fact. Oh, that's very cool. So, do you come back much at the moment then? Because I've seen things like with you speak. I think you spoke at your old high school or something. I saw when I was researching for this. Obviously, your parents are there, so you must come back a bit. But how frequently do you come back to Scotland these days?
Yeah, normally between 2 and 4 times a year. So yeah, I've got another event on in the south of England at Southsea, 15th and 16th of April. So I'm coming over for that. And then I've got another event in Birmingham, the 12th of November. And I'm going to stay until the 4th of December because that's my mum's 80th. So I'll be back for about a month then. But last year I was back for about 6 weeks over summer. So it's good to be able to just come back and yeah, as I said, there's no place like home.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it must be nice to come back and, as you say, be home, catch up with people and things like that. If you don't mind me asking as well, with like your biological brother and some of the people there, are you still connected to those people? Because obviously some people sort of sever ties with where they're from, and it's not to be get into anything too personal, but just your philosophy to that. You still keep in touch with people from your past before you were adopted?
Um, Not really. I mean, so my brother, I do. Obviously, he's still in my life. I catch up with him every time I come home. And there's a couple of people that actually found me through like some of the interviews since the book and the movie came out that I went to school with, and they were in the school, the primary school, Stone Dyke Primary in Drumchapel, Glasgow. And it was lunchtime on Christmas Eve, and that's when I was taken away. So it was a half day at school. And no one saw me ever again. John Craig, my biological name, disappeared. And no one had heard from me since 1979 until all this started happening about 2017, 2018. So it was almost 40 years. And a couple of people have now reconnected on Facebook, but we haven't met in person yet. So hopefully we'll catch up. But they are people from my previous life that is a bit of a blur.
Wow, that's amazing in a way. I mean, obviously the circumstances were pretty rough, but the fact you just disappeared, I mean, yeah, people don't think of that side of it.
Yeah, they
Amazing.
couldn't Google me because John Craig doesn't exist. Well, the John Craig here, he's long gone. I mean, I'm John Bolgen. So yeah, they didn't know the difference until all the articles start coming out, and then there was a lot of publicity in Glasgow, especially. So people started seeing it. Oh, that's where he is. He's still alive.
Yeah, that must have been weird from obviously your point of view, but from their point of view as well. Like you just pop up out of nowhere and you're doing
Yeah.
really well. So it's very cool. So obviously, I'll come back to the exposure and everything in a moment now. But you touched on moving to Australia first before California. I just want to go back there because it's a valuable life lesson, and everything I work on here, I try and pick things that are associated to life lessons that people can use for whatever their dream is, if you get what I mean with that. And obviously, taking the plunge to go somewhere to pursue your dream, it's a big decision because you were leaving everything behind at that time. Then obviously you've done that again, going to California. Can you share with us what was sort of going through your head at that time in terms of the decision to leave Scotland behind, leave everyone you were associated with behind and go and chase a dream in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was the weather. I wanted to ride my bike every day.
Mm.
And sadly, as well, we had some abandoned warehouses, as they are all over the UK, and we used to build ramps inside these warehouses because they were damp, but at least they weren't raining inside. So, but our last one, it was an old warehouse, which is now the Dundee Contemporary Arts Centre, which is crazy. The building still stands. Our ramps were actually people broke into them and set them on fire, and that was my last. That was my last thing. I was just like, I'm out of here. So I applied for immigration. My parents have family over there, so one of my aunts and uncles sponsored me under John Bolgens, obviously, and yeah, moved there June 1995. So yeah, it's coming up for 28 years. And it was just to ride my bike. And it was funny. I told my friends, they were like, what are you going to do in Australia? And I said, I'm going to get on Neighbours. They're like, whatever, dude, it's sure you are. And within 3 months, I was an extra on Neighbours. And then I was on it and got some featured parts over about 3 years. And I'm still friends with a couple of them, like Carl Kennedy, Dr. Kennedy. That's Alan Fletcher. We're still friends today. And then Kim Valentine, we're still friends. And she was Libby on Neighbours. So there's a few people I still keep in contact with. And especially Alan, I see him every time I'm either in Australia or he's over here in California. And he's doing a lot of tours through the UK right now as well.
Yeah, I have heard one or two things about that. That is amazing, though. I mean, I knew the weather would come into it somewhere. It had to come in. Obviously, it comes into it California, but when I said at the beginning, it has to come into it. But yeah, keeping in touch with those people, friends for life. So acting then, or that type of thing was always a dream of yours, as well as obviously the BMX success. Then am I right in saying that?
Yeah, definitely. I always wanted to do acting. But just didn't know how to really get into it. I wasn't good at school, so then I couldn't get into university and all that. And it was like my bike riding was definitely taking me in the right direction. And so I couldn't fully focus on going to acting school or anything else. So, but when I went to Australia, I was like, all right, I'm going to give this a go now. So I did that for a few years. Even had the same agent as Chris Hemsworth. So Chris lived in the same area of Melbourne I was, and Chris actually worked for my friend's snowboard and surf store. So I actually knew Chris pretty well back then, which was awesome. I haven't met him since I've been in California, but I believe he's up in Byron Bay right now, living there with his family. He doesn't really do much, and he's not in Hollywood much at the moment. So, but yeah, it was just the people I met through there, like Jackie Chan, Hugh Jackman. I mean, the list goes on. It was just all the movies that were getting made in Melbourne, Australia. I pretty much got involved in about 50% of them all, which was cool.
Wow, that is incredible.
Kept a little paycheck coming in whilst I was still riding.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, yeah, that is amazing actually, because I heard bits and pieces about this, but like I didn't know you'd met some of those guys. Incredible. Wow. So obviously with your BMX journey itself, people want to know more about it, read the book, like I said at the beginning. But to give mention to what you regard as maybe one or two of your highlights, your personal favorites, competitions, moments, whatever. I love asking this question because usually it's not the answer you'd necessarily expect or think of straight away. In your own words, could you mention one or two of your BMX highlights, please?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Barrow and Furnace was actually one of my contests I got second in. I never won a contest in my life. I
Yeah.
got second. That was about the best I ever did. But I wanted to share that because there's only one winner, but there's all these millions of kids that got second and third and everything else. And when we were doing the movie, I actually wanted to be second because everyone thinks it's going to be the Karate Kid moment, the underdog's going to win. And I was like, but I didn't win the contest, but I won life. And so I wanted to share that more, that kids could be inspired, that it's not about the winning the contest, it's about winning in yourself. And so that was great. And that's the message I always want to pass on. And the other one was probably the King of Concrete, which was in Southsea. And that was in 1993. And that was it was a hot summer actually. And yeah, that was one of my best because I was getting the highest I'd ever done in any contest before. And I don't remember my rating then, definitely didn't win, but it was the banter. And even when the Scottish guys came down to England, there was about 18, 20 of us, but we would always cause a riot in the middle of the contest. So when I was riding my contest, I was going so good that a bunch of my friends ran on to the course to strip me naked in front of everyone. I'm like, I'm doing really good here. Don't F this up. They didn't get me. I was too fast. And but they got one of my other friends, Chris. They got him and totally stripped him in front of everyone. So that was the banter of a UK contest.
That is wild, man. Yeah, it gives a different perspective on the banter and everything, but fun times, good memories. So that is incredible. I also want to touch on here. Obviously, I've mentioned throughout this thing about read the book, because anyone who wants to know the full story, obviously the film as well. I mean, fantastic. But people take it as read because you're such a well-known individual that obviously your life is in print, your life is on the screen. But if I put myself in your shoes for a minute, that must be an interesting experience, to have your life out there. Obviously, you're used to it, but what actually goes through your mind now, when you do see, I mean, I could say you're probably used to it and everything, but when you see your life on a big screen, and obviously during the process of writing the book as well, recreating some of these things, what was that like? I mean, I can imagine it was quite an emotional experience at times.
Yeah, Liam, it was. It, I mean, writing everything down was tough at times, but then I realized I was writing it to help young John. That's why I wrote myself a little letter at the end of the book.
Mm.
What would I say to young John? What would I say to young kids? I mean, I would love, like, I had a lecturer from Oxford University contacted me when they read the book, and they said this book should be in all the schools because there's a lot to be learned from it. That take a stand for another human being. It's like all these A grades and gold stars. That's what I grew up with. I never got an A grade or a gold star. I was like getting yellow stars and green stars, and so to actually show these kids that, hey, you don't have to be the A+ student to win in life. There's other ways of doing that. And so that's what, by sharing my story in a book, I wanted that kids could actually inspire to be anything, not me, just anything they wanted to be. And then in the movie, probably the hardest part was playing my biological father,
Yeah.
because I'm the one beating up my mum, and then young John has to run in and attack me with a kitchen knife. And that day, I mean, we filmed those scenes on one day because it was going to be too tough. Even my producer and director said, we don't think this is a good idea for you to play him. But I did it, and it was honestly, it was a blackout pretty much the whole day, but it was very cathartic, because I know I'm nothing like that. I'm a lover, I'm a protector. Could never even imagine hitting a woman or a child. You just can't do it. It just wouldn't. And so yeah, knowing by sharing that as well, that it's just taking on life and running with it. And so by doing that, I managed to release some of the pain I was holding on to, which I didn't even realize I was holding on to in my 40s. But yeah, now knowing that how hard it is to be an actor, to become that vicious man, you have to be believable. And so you have to become that vicious man. And that's why my acting coaches were telling me, yeah, that's you in the moment of that character. And that's why you don't remember much of it, because you weren't you. If you were you acting as that person, well, it would come across as acting. You have to be believable. And so that was pretty powerful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm glad we covered that. I was going to ask you about it anyway, because again, very brave thing to do. It's good to hear that it gave you some new perspectives on that situation and released some things. It's very, very good. Now, with the book though, is one other thing that I think is super amazing, to be honest. When I was researching for this, I came across the fact that obviously academia and things like that, it wasn't something you gelled with. I had a very similar experience in school, by the way, for what it's worth. I don't usually say that, but for me, only started reading maybe 11, 12, something like that. So I totally relate to that. For you, I think it was like 10, 11, something like that. So obviously, from basically not being able to read until a late age, until writing a book, I don't have a really specific question about that, but it's just amazing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, Liam, because I wrote my story down in my fifth grade. No, it was fourth year. Fourth year. I don't know what the schools are like nowadays, if they're still doing the year system or whatever it is, but it was fourth year English exam, and I wrote my story down. I wrote about the fire. I wrote about the sexual abuse. I wrote everything down, and I got an F and basically failed English. And the teacher said, "This is rubbish. This didn't happen." it up, and so I didn't speak about it much after that. And then to write the book, it was like I realized that when I wrote my story when I was a kid, I was writing that about me. Whereas I was writing the book, I was writing it to share others. It was about everyone else. And so that's what made it a lot simpler and easy for me to share it. So hopefully that sort of kind of answers your question
Yeah,
there.
you know, it makes sense. It does. I came across that when I was researching for this about the, writing the story down and it being rejected and everything. And weirdly, I found that more shocking in a sense than obviously everything that happened to you, the cruelty and everything it is shocking. But the fact that, you spoke out and no one believes you, I just was blown away for a minute when I was reading it. So, but at least the story's out there now and it is helping people. You've touched on you've touched on a couple of times what your aim and what your hope from the book actually is. But again, just to hone in on that a little bit further, in simple terms, like what you hope that the book accomplishes now it's out there. Let's share your thoughts on that a little bit further.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's all about inspiring others, taking a stand for another human being, knowing that so many are still going through troubles today. I mean, my book is the timeline of my life, whereas the movie is modern day, because I wanted to show that domestic violence, racism, child abuse is still prevalent today. I mean, it's terrible what's going on out there. Like in America right now, there's over 500,000 kids in foster system bouncing around homes and everything else, and I know the UK's got some terrible stats as well. So I wanted to basically be that voice, and hopefully we can help kids in school. The teaching the ABCs, is that the way we should be taught? I mean, what about the social workers? They're so understaffed and underpaid, and they have to have a quota of how many families they have to go and see. It's like, how do you really know if those problems are going on in that home? So, I'm not blaming anyone for this. The system is broken. And hopefully by me sharing, even right now, people might switch on a light and say, we need to fix this because it's only going to get worse. So that's what I'm hoping from the book and the movie, that message comes across, that these are problems that are still here today, but we can fix it.
Absolutely. Powerful message. I love that. I hope what we're doing today, even in a small way, helps that cause, however much, even if it just adds a few more people's awareness, it's worth doing. Obviously, as I mentioned at the beginning, you're very involved in Adoption UK. You do a lot of work with that, and obviously, I'd like to touch on a few things of your life outside of the BMX and the acting. Big question, I know, but what are some of the most rewarding aspects of that role for you personally?
I mean, definitely it's wow. I mean, probably the biggest achievement for me was my 50th birthday last year. I set myself a goal, and instead of me getting a gift, but I actually wanted to raise financial aid for Adoption UK, and I think I beat my target by 2.5 times, which was brilliant. That was one of my proudest moments for Adoption UK. I want to do more, but every time, and again, Adoption UK is a charity, so it's like when their events are on, I'm never in the country because I need to be in the country for some sort of business. Because a lot of the charity work I do, I pay for my own flights, I pay for my own accommodation, I pay to turn up to these events, but then who's paying me? And you can't expect charities to pay you to do these charitable things. So I want to do more with Adoption UK, and that's why I'm buying a house in Scotland, so I can be home more and possibly do more for Adoption UK, adoption all over the world. Definitely.
Yeah. And well, it's amazing work you're doing. I mean, I really think that giving back to people, contributing to people in this way, it's pretty much the highest aim people can aspire to in life, looking, that's just my personal opinion, looking beyond yourself to these things. What are some of the reforms and some of the changes you would like to see happen in an ideal world? I don't have a timeline on this, but because it could be months, years, whatever, that's up to you. But just some of the things you would like to see change, that you're personally aiming for.
Like, I mean, it's crazy you're asking this because I was at a party here in San Diego on Saturday night, and there was this principal there, and I shared, I believe the system is broken, and I said, like, there's always one or two bullies in the school, and it's still happening today. Why can't we teach the kids? So if there's 28 kids, 30 kids in the classroom, and there's maybe one or two bullies, why can't we teach those 28 kids to stand up for that one child that is being bullied and say, no, because the power is there, the majority is there. Take a stand for another human being is there. Like, show in school that, the best you can be yourself, not the best that the education system says you are. And I actually did that in Australia. I donated a bike to a school, and it was about be the best you can be. So the bike went to the child that had the best grades in themselves. So whoever grew the most over the year won the bike. So even if you were getting an F and you ended up getting a D, you had the biggest growth. The A plus student, I'm sorry, they never won the bike, because where do you go after A plus? So I think the system really needs to look at each individual kid and go, okay, well, some are that way and some aren't. So maybe we should be treated the same. If you had that, I remember my English teacher did that and gave me a B once, gave me a B. I wrote a synopsis on the Count of Monte Cristo, and he loved it. And I did all these maps and everything, and handed it in for my English exam, and he gave me a B, and it was the best I'd ever done in school. But he also said he saw the change in me over 12 months. And I think, I wish the system would look at that more, that it's the change in you. Just because you're not learning your algebra, you might be, an amazing artist or wherever you want to be. So
Yeah.
I think we have to encourage these kids and adolescents to actually believe in themselves more, instead of, you did that wrong, that's not right. That's hopefully my message.
Well, it's powerful message. It's a really, because going off on a slight tangent, I mean, not too much of one, but for years I've been saying, even on a very small scale, that in schools, people spend a lot of years learning, as you say, maths, English, learning about historical figures, learning about all these things. They don't spend any time learning about themselves, what their actual unique talents are. Obviously, it's a one size fits all system, unfortunately, and some people just don't fit that. And obviously, instead of having any other avenues, they sort of fall by the wayside and get involved in the wrong things. And there's nothing in the schools about life, I mean, healthy relationship boundaries, self-esteem. There's so many sort of intangible things that are not in there. And with more and more parents working, and people got like, say, single moms or whatever, then they're working all the hours. They don't always have the time to teach the kids some of these intangible things. It's fallen by the wayside. And I really think there should be, I don't know what you'd call it, mind you, but I really think there should be that process of what you're saying, of identifying that person's individual talents. Not everybody's academic. Some people are creative, some people are good communicators, some people are good, it comes in many forms. And it's not a question I'm saying there, but it's quite exciting, because it's wonderful work that you're doing. And I really hope that you continue pushing that message and just maximizing it, to be honest. That's something I wouldn't usually say in an interview, but I had to say to you, especially because of my own experiences in school. I don't usually do this, but it's very, very powerful. So
I
awesome.
think we can all learn from it, can't we? We
Yeah,
really can.
yeah. So it's like I say, I mean, absolutely. And it's just breaking down the one size fits all system, absolutely. Getting this back on track though, to the relevant things. I love the message. Obviously Harrow Bikes as well. You're very, very, very involved in that. Continuing their legacy, making all types of contributions. I think as well you're involved in, obviously, some of the engineering of bikes as well, and the design, or you have a keen interest in that. So what does it mean to you to be furthering, obviously, Harrow and their legacy, but also, furthering the development of BMX and what people are doing for the next generation. Same type of thing, really, as the other one, just the most rewarding aspects of that job for you, really.
Yeah, I mean, well, Liam, I actually 2nd of January, I went out on my own. I
Okay.
have my own business called Lineage Consulting Group. So I consult with other brands, the iconic brands in the 80s. Um, so I've actually taken it on a different direction, but it frees me up now. So Lineage Consulting Group, I can work with the bikes, I can work in the movies, and I can work with foster and adoption. So I'm just setting that up right now. I'm out on my own, so which I'm loving. I did 10 years at Harrow, and we've come to an agreement that I can still help them and consult, but I want to be free to live in the UK for 3 months over June, July, August. I can go down to Australia. My daughter lives down there, and stay there for a couple of months, because now, like we're doing here, we can work from anywhere in the world, and I love being a free man again. So but like the little things, I mean, if you watched the Olympics last year, Logan Martin won gold in the Olympics, and I was his first bike sponsor. So knowing that I can pick young talent up and young athletes up at an early age and inspire them to go and win gold in the Olympics, I mean, it gives me goosebumps right now, like just I've had a little piece of that, but he always recognizes me as the first man who sponsored him on a bike. And that was my company called Pilgrim. And I established that in 1992, but it was mostly making videos and everything. Then I did it into a bike company. And so I sponsored him. And pretty much, if you've heard of Nitro Circus, so Nitro Circus is action sports done by Travis Pastrana. Pretty much when Nitro Circus started, all the guys on BMX were on a Pilgrim. So the first triple backflip, quadruple backflip was done on a Pilgrim from an athlete, Jed Milden, down in New Zealand. And knowing that, yeah, I've had that opportunity to inspire the next generation that are going to have that inspiration to the following generation. As I said, that's me leaving my little mark on the sport, knowing that I can just sit back and go, I was a part of that. And I love that these athletes are taking it even further than we could possibly have imagined. And then going into the sort of the engineering of the bike, I'm a visual guy. So I come up with all the ideas and the concepts. When I was in Japan in 2019, my customer there had me do a talk to all her customers. She's a distributor. Then she gets all the stores together in Tokyo. And she introduces me as, excuse the accent, please, I'm not being racist, but she goes, this is John Bojans. He is the Steve Jobs of bicycle industry. That's how she introduces me. And I'm like, shit, okay. So that, again, goosebumps. That was like, wow, I'm not even gonna say just, because just isn't in my vocabulary anymore. I'm a visionary, I'm a creator, and then I get the right people, the engineers, the right factories, the welders, and I bring them all together. So I know who does the best work here. I mean, when we're putting a bike together, it's 56 different factory makers to build a bicycle. It's not just one factory makes a bike. You have to get the hub maker, the spoke maker, the rim maker, the tire maker. Like, that all breaks up. So there's a lot of communication, and then it's like a massive jigsaw that I love to bring together and bring out that product that has the emotional connection. In the past 10 years, I've had so many middle-aged men reach out to me and say, you've given me my childhood back, because I make a modern day bike look like the original vintage bike. I've been talking to Rally actually recently. Hopefully I do a Rally burner with those guys. That would be pretty fun. There's a bike I've just built downstairs called a DP Firebird, and that was actually made in Cardiff. So imagine that. And it's so weird because it says made in Great Britain on the chainstay, but then in the seat tube it says made in England. And I'm like, Cardiff's not England. Who put that sticker on there? So it'd be great to do other projects like that, because there's people that just remember the 80s. And when I'm 50, going on 51 a couple of months, and I feel like I'm still a teenager when I'm riding a bike and when I'm at the skate park and everything. And kids are like, how old are you? I'm like, shut it. But it's cool to know that. And I've had men tell me I saved their life, by either sharing the story or getting them back into BMX. They were so depressed, and especially going on 3 years now, 2 years and 10 months since COVID. I mean, the depression and isolation, it's the worst place to put someone with depression. Isolate them, I mean, closing down gymnasiums and beaches and everything else. But that's the one thing you could do, is get out on your bike and go and ride. And so knowing that people have managed to get that spark back in them again, obviously when you fall over, you don't pick yourself up as easily, but it's good to know that I had, again, a little piece of bringing some people back into the sport and hopefully helping them make a decision to stay here on this planet whilst we've got this gift of life.
Yeah. Wow, that is beautiful, really. I mean, everything you said there is the only word I can think of to describe it. Yeah, I mean, the mental health thing, isolation, massive problem, in society. So breaking that down, making people feel that they're not alone, I think is a big part of something you do across the multiple sort of avenues that you work with as well. Showing people age is just a number as well, which it really is. I mean, there's a whole load of lessons there that I could go off on tangents with. Absolutely amazing. And I come back to the whole legacy thing in a moment. But the last couple of things now, because obviously we've gone over the time I said and everything, but it's flowing by. So the last couple of well, not literally the last couple, but the last sort of two or three things. A fun question for you though. I mean, you have one heck of a bike collection. When I was researching for this, I came across a video where you're showing people, you're showing to the camera all these different bikes that you've got. Can you just share with us a little bit about what that means to you, sort of on a personal level, to have the different eras, if you like, or the different years, sort of captured in a way in that bike, if you get what I mean?
Yeah, so 1997, I was living in Australia for a couple of years, and my parents were moving house in Dundee, out to Carnoustie. And so all my old shit was under the house. I mean, plaster casts, I've actually got the plaster cast still here, sitting in the cupboard. Old broken bikes, crutches, and then all my Star Wars figures, everything was under the house. They shipped 13, 15 tea chests full of all my stuff and to Australia. And so I opened it all up. I was like, no way, it's like Christmas again. I hadn't seen this stuff. I mean, even though it's only been, I was only in Australia 2.5 years when they sent it over, but I hadn't seen all that stuff because it was all boxed away for years. It was all broken. And 1997 was the beginning of eBay. So I was like, hey, okay, so a little bit of a hobby. I'm going to start building up my original bikes and make them look like they were. That's where it started in 97. So I had my first 3 Harrow bikes, and then I managed to get them all re-welded, repainted, stickered, and then rebuilt them up. And I went from those 3 to 128 Harrows. So I then decided, well, I'm going to build the entire timeline of Harrow's history. Now, I built every single pro model of the bike company, every year of their existence. Sadly, I wanted Harrow to own this, but the shareholders weren't interested in the entire collection because, I mean, it was worth $360,000. So it's like £300,000, all these bikes. But it took me 21 years to collect them all. So I ended up selling them all and buying this house. And, I was like, well, I'm renting at 48 years old, or 47, 48. I was like, I'm renting at 47 years old. And I'm sitting on all these bikes, and most of them were in boxes. So when the shareholders weren't interested in buying them, I just split them all up, sadly, but sold them all and bought a house. And then I've now kept my personal ones. And like I said, the DP Firebird, which was made in Cardiff, I've rebuilt that. It's not my bike, but I built it exactly the way it was. And it's funny because that bike, I even forgot about it after all the concussions, but it's actually in the credits of the movie, The Ride. So I'm walking out with my boombox, and my boombox is hanging up above the kitchen. It's up there on the shelf. So I've got that old vintage 83 boombox, and I've managed to build the 85 DP Firebird. So Now I'm building my own timeline of my existence. And then I've decided it's in my will, but certain places like the DCA, Dundee Contemporary Arts Centre, that was the old warehouse we used to break into and build ramps. I'm going to donate the bike I was riding in that warehouse. I'm going to donate one of my bikes that I rode at my school. And that's where they're going to go once I pass on. I would like it to go somewhere because I could sell them all for $5,000 each, but I would rather them go to live on display somewhere. But just to tell you, with that DCA, the Dundee Contemporary Arts Centre, the old warehouse we used to live in, that is now a cinema, and I managed to show my own movie in that building like 28 years after the fact that we used to ride there as kids. So I invited 200 of my closest friends and family, and they were all BMXers and skateboarders from all over the country that rode in that factory. And that video is online as well. And to have that and all those people that made me the man I am today, that was bigger than the movie itself. To go home and show that to my closest friends was amazing. So the Dundee Contemporary Arts Centre's got a little soft spot in my heart.
Wow, that is a beautiful story again. I mean, going back there, sort of full circle in a way, and showing everyone not only how far you've come, but what you represent as a human being and everything as well. Absolutely, absolutely extraordinary. Wow, I didn't know that, but that is just amazing.
I'll have to send you the link to that one. It's only about 10 minutes, but
please
and,
do.
and I'll tell you, one of the biggest skateboarders in the world, his name is Steve Caballero. So Tony Hawk and Steve Caballero are the two biggest names. And Steve is in the movie, The Ride. He's got a little cameo on his skateboard. But I got a few of the actors as well as Steve Caballero to do a video message. So before the movie played, everyone from Hollywood is sending these messages. And then Steve Caballero calls out the Dundee Hardcore Skate Squad. The cinema just erupted with screams because he was their hero, and for him to acknowledge them was amazing. So that's probably one of the biggest things I've given my friends.
Yeah. Wow, that is extraordinary. I mean, I love the message behind it, the meaning behind it, and everything. Absolutely incredible. It must have been a very, very sort of poignant moment for you, very powerful moment. Obviously, a lot of emotion there. So it is incredible. Well, there we are. I mean, there's so many cool things you said there, including obviously the bike in Cardiff, local to me, and there's a load of things. But I keep resisting the temptation to go off on this subject and that subject because we have gone past the time that we said. So literally the last couple of things really. I do mean two this time. The last things. One of them is throughout this whole talk, we've highlighted a lot of life lessons. We've highlighted a lot of things that people can learn and people can take away from your journey all the way through. When it comes to achieving dreams and goals and everything, I love how you've given that a different point of view. You've given that its accurate point of view is it's not always about getting the first, the top tier thing, but it's about the growth and everything. Love that. So if someone were to come to you and say, well, look, John, I have a big goal I want to achieve, regardless of sports or anything now, just in life, right? What would be sort of one or two things that you would say to those people? Because as I mentioned at the beginning, we've talked about that all the way through. So there's quite a lot of that dotted through the interview. But just to distill, one or two things with everything you've accomplished in life, everything you've accomplished being rich in life, not just in money, being, you described words that effect earlier that you've won at life, even though you never placed first or whatever. So that principle, right, distilled into a couple of tips, if you like, for people who want to achieve something. I know it's a really big question, so that's why I've tried to narrow it down to one or two things. What would you say to those people?
Well, it was funny, Liam, because I was going to tell you when we were making the film, Forrest Lucas of Lucas Oil, he's a billionaire. I mean, look at this guy. He's 80 years old. And anyway, the last weekend of the film, we're sitting down for dinner, and he asked to sit down next to me, and I'm like, yeah, great. I mean, you're paying for everything. And so he sat down, Liam, and he looked at me in the eye and he said, John, you are the richest man I've ever met. And this guy's a billionaire. And it is the richness of life. He told me, he said, look, I'll be lucky to have 5 people at my funeral, but I employ 50,000 people. He said, here's you, and everyone here is here for you. He said, that's the richness of life. Don't forget it. So where we're going with that is, my saying is create, believe, achieve. Like, create it, believe it 100%. You will achieve it. Like, create the most amazing, crazy things you could ever think of. And I always also say is surround yourself with the 5 most inspirational, powerful, unstoppable human beings around you, because you will soak up what they're giving out. And for many years, I thought I could help so many people and surrounded myself with all this negativity. I'm sorry, but that one negativity has to be surrounded by at least another 5 positives to bring that out. So that's my message, is surround yourself with the most amazing human beings you have in your circle. And that's who you become. You become the 5 people you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
Make the choice.
I love that. I mean, yeah, perfect, really, because that's a life lesson that can apply to any walk of life. The power of association, who you spend time with, you become. Absolutely, very, very applicable. But I love that other story about, being rich in life, because it was really something that just struck me about your story. Was, yeah, as I mentioned, rich in the true sense. And I'm sure you make great money doing what you do, but at the end of the day, your legacy is so much deeper than that, because of all the lives that you've touched and continue to touch. Which does lead me to the last question, which you've sort of,
Oh, sorry, I was going to say,
yeah,
along that line is, one of the best sayings I ever heard was actually from David Beckham. And
okay,
he says, I don't chase the money, I chase the ball.
yeah,
And it's like, with my sport and my life and everything else, I've just chased what I wanted to get and do and make a difference. I've never chased the money. Because if I was, I'd probably be a very lonely man. I was always chasing and inspiring, and that's more powerful than bringing in, because you can't take it with you, So, but the love that you're going to leave behind is timeless. It really is. So sorry for disturbing you there.
No, 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 not at all. Well, I mean, all I was going to say was that my last question was really about, what you feel that your legacy will manifest as, in terms of the impact you've had on people. But we've kind of answered that. I mean, what you just said there, unless there's anything you want to add to it. And don't get me wrong, I don't mean that in like a morbid way or anything either, because you've got a lot of years left to do what you do. But I just mean in the impact that you're having that's so wide reaching. That is an incredible legacy to have. I mean, it's the quote I always love that says, that sort of quantifies that. I think it's what we do for ourselves dies with us, but what we do for others lives on forever, or something like that. And I don't know who actually said that originally, but that principle is really illustrated in what we've talked about today. As I mentioned to you, we've gone over time here. So to wrap this up, is there anything else you'd like to say to people around the world who support what you do, who want to get involved in helping what you do in any way as well, or just anything else, anyone you'd like to thank, just anything else to do with other people around you? As soon as we were just talking about that, to wrap this up, and then and that's pretty much a wrap, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, I'll finish off by saying the past is a lesson, the present is a gift, and the future is your motivation. So all we have is now, and if you can inspire people around you, lift them up. A great leader lifts you up, never puts you down. And you can be that person. We all can. So acknowledge yourself every day and acknowledge others around you. And we can heal this planet. We really can, one day at a time, but I know we will. So yeah. And honestly, thanks for having me on. Thanks to my parents for choosing me, because for years I felt like I wasn't good enough. I was abandoned, I was rejected, but I'm the chosen one. And so I share that as well with a lot of these kids. Just because you come from a broken home, but you were chosen by your adoptive parents, I think that's more powerful. So yeah, that's how I think I'll end it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like I say, I know it sort of puts you on the spot there where I say, always, is anyone you'd like to thank or anything you'd like to say? But first of all, I just felt that there was a little something, obviously you've said that now. But I like to close out with giving people a mention, because when I do these interviews, like with your life, not no man's an island. There's great people around you, as soon as we touched on that, helping, and you know who they are, they know you, you know them. But from the outside world, some people are sort of behind the scenes or whatnot. So giving them a mention for everyone else is a great way to close out. Um, Thank you for your time, John. I mean, thank you for being an open book as well, and really speaking from the heart, because I've got to say it's incredibly brave. And I don't mean that to sound cheesy or weird or anything, but it really is, putting some of these things out about your life that are so raw and so personal, putting them out there to help people, incredibly brave. The lessons you've shared, it's all just incredible. So thank you so much.
Thank you. No, thank you. And I mean, I used to think vulnerability was a weakness. Now I know it's a strength, and vulnerability is attractive. So, yeah, we can all be vulnerable, and it's not a weakness. So, I learned that again later on in life. But yeah, life is amazing, and no matter where we are, just live the life you love.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.